The galaxy's heart beat slow and steady, lulled by the rhythm of bureaucracy and the narcotic of tradition. In the capital spire of the Hegemony, the air was thick with the scent of victory, an artificial blend of ozone, rare spices, and the faint tang of burnt propellant from the ceremonial salvos that had just been fired into the void. The banners of 100 worlds hung from the vaulted ceiling, each one a testament to the Hegemony's reach, each one a silent reminder of the price of resistance. Admiral Vexer stood at the center of the Grand Bridge, his scales polished to a mirror sheen, his uniform immaculate. Around him, the officers of the fleet, reptilian, avian, mammalian, and stranger things besides, moved with the precise choreography of a well-rehearsed ballet. Every gesture, every word, every flick of a tail or twitch of a crest was calculated to reinforce the illusion of control. On the main display, the last vestiges of the human defense fleet flickered and died, their ships reduced to expanding clouds of debris and plasma. The room erupted in polite applause, the sound carefully modulated so as not to disturb the delicate equilibrium of power that held the Hegemony together. Vexer allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. "The resistance is broken," he announced, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of tradition. "The Sol system is ours." The words were met with a chorus of approval, but beneath the surface there was an undercurrent of unease. The humans had fought harder than expected, their tactics unpredictable, their technology more advanced than the initial reports had suggested. But in the end, numbers and tradition had prevailed. Or so it seemed. Far below, on the blue-green world that had been the source of so much trouble, another kind of celebration was taking place. In hidden bunkers and encrypted chat rooms, in the quiet corners of laboratories and the bustling chaos of refugee camps, humans watched the same feed and smiled. Their smiles were not the smiles of the conquered, but of the patient, the prepared, the quietly defiant. For while the Hegemony celebrated, the real work was just beginning. The Hegemony's cartographers prided themselves on their precision. Every star, every planet, every trade route was meticulously catalogued, color-coded, and assigned a value. The galaxy, to them, was a puzzle to be solved, a game to be won by those with the sharpest pencils and the steadiest hands. When the first probes returned from Sol, the data was unremarkable. A high-gravity world, teeming with life, its dominant species a bipedal primate with a penchant for violence and an alarming rate of technological progress. The analysts filed their reports, assigned Earth a provisional rating of manageable, and moved on to more pressing concerns. But maps are not the territory, and the neat lines drawn in conference rooms rarely survive contact with reality. On Earth, the news of first contact was met with a mixture of awe, fear, and, most of all, curiosity. The world's governments scrambled to present a united front, but old rivalries and new ambitions simmered beneath the surface. Scientists pored over the alien data. Engineers reverse-engineered every scrap of technology they could get their hands on, and philosophers debated the implications of humanity's place in the cosmos. The Hegemony, for its part, was content to let the humans play at diplomacy. They imposed quotas, restricted access to advanced technology, and dispatched a rotating cast of minor functionaries to keep the locals occupied. The real decisions were made elsewhere, in rooms where humans were discussed as problems to be managed, not partners to be engaged. But while the diplomats danced, the engineers worked. In underground labs and orbital workshops, teams of humans drawn from every nation, every discipline, every walk of life began to build something new. They called it Project Prometheus, and its goal was simple: to ensure that humanity would never again be at the mercy of someone else's map. The first prototypes were crude, cobbled together from stolen schematics and scavenged parts. But with each iteration, the design improved. The engineers learned to think not like conquerors, but like survivors. They built redundancy into every system, planned for every contingency, and assumed that the sky itself might one day turn against them. In the Hegemony's files, Earth remained a footnote. In reality, it was becoming the fulcrum on which the future would turn. The heart of Project Prometheus was not a reactor or a weapon, but a philosophy. The engineers who led the project understood that survival was not about strength, but about adaptability. They studied the failures of past empires, the collapses of civilizations that had grown too rigid, too complacent, too certain of their own superiority. They built their labs in places the Hegemony would never think to look. Beneath the ice of Antarctica, in the pressure-cooked darkness of the Marianas Trench, in the hollowed-out cores of asteroids drifting in the Oort cloud. Each site was a node in a network of redundancy, a fail-safe against the day when the enemy found one and thought the job done. The work was grueling, the hours long, the risks immense. But the engineers thrived on the challenge. They were a motley crew, old hands from the world's great space agencies, young prodigies from universities nobody had heard of, hackers and tinkerers and dreamers who had never quite fit in anywhere else. They argued constantly, laughed often, and worked with a kind of manic intensity that bordered on the religious. The first breakthrough came not from a weapon, but from a shield. By studying the energy signatures of Hegemony weapons, the team developed a field that could absorb and redirect incoming fire, turning the enemy's strength into a resource. The prototype was tested in secret, its success celebrated with a round of cheap whiskey and a promise to keep going. But Prometheus was more than a shield. It was a platform, a foundation on which to build a new kind of civilization, one that could survive not just the Hegemony, but the universe itself. As the project grew, so did its ambitions. The engineers began to experiment with more exotic technologies, pocket dimensions, quantum entanglement, localized manipulation of physical constants. Each success was a step closer to the ultimate goal, a machine that could hold back the darkness, not just for Earth, but for any world willing to learn. The Hegemony, meanwhile, continued to underestimate its newest subject. They saw only what they expected to see, and in doing so, missed the quiet revolution unfolding beneath their feet. Absolutely. Here's the next section, continuing the expanded, detailed HFY narrative in your style group voice. The Hegemony's diplomats were masters of the long game. They had learned over centuries that the best way to control a new species was not through open conquest, but through the slow, suffocating embrace of bureaucracy. They imposed quotas, demanded tribute, and offered just enough technology to keep their subjects dependent, but never enough to make them dangerous. For the humans, this was both a challenge and an opportunity. They played the part of the eager student, nodding along to lectures on proper development and responsible stewardship. They accepted the restrictions, signed the treaties, and sent their best and brightest to study at the feet of the Hegemony's scholars. But behind the scenes, the real work continued. Every inspection was an opportunity to learn, every quota a puzzle to be solved. The engineers of Project Prometheus became experts in misdirection, hiding their true progress behind layers of plausible deniability and carefully crafted decoys. The first real test came when the Hegemony demanded a demonstration of compliance. A fleet of inspectors arrived in orbit, their ships bristling with sensors and weapons. They expected to find a planet cowed by defeat, its people grateful for the protection of their new overlords. Instead, they found a world that was busy, but not broken. The factories hummed with activity, the universities overflowed with students, and the streets were alive with a sense of purpose that was impossible to fake. The inspectors took their samples, ran their tests, and left with reports that confirmed what they already believed. The humans were harmless. What they didn't see was the network of hidden bunkers, the encrypted communications bouncing between labs, the quiet confidence in the eyes of the engineers who knew that the real test was yet to come. It came sooner than anyone expected. One night, as the world slept, a Hegemony cruiser in orbit detected an anomaly. A burst of energy, too brief to be a weapon, too focused to be an accident. The ship's sensors traced it to a remote corner of the planet, a place the maps labeled as uninhabited. Within minutes, a team of inspectors was dispatched. They found nothing but an empty field, the grass still smoldering from the heat of the event. The official report blamed a meteorite, and the matter was closed. But in a hidden lab beneath the field, the engineers of Project Prometheus celebrated. The test had been a success. The first stabilizer engine had been activated, and the universe had not ended. Not yet. The stabilizer engine was a marvel of human ingenuity. It was not a weapon, at least not in the traditional sense. It did not fire beams or launch missiles. Instead, it created a bubble of reality, a region where the laws of physics could be held constant even as the universe around it shifted and changed. The idea had come from a simple observation: the universe was not as stable as it appeared. Over cosmic timescales, the fundamental constants could drift, leading to catastrophic changes in the behavior of matter and energy. Most civilizations never noticed, or if they did, they assumed it was a problem for future generations. Humans, raised on a world where the weather could kill you and the ground could swallow you whole, took a different view. They saw instability as a challenge to be met, not a fate to be endured. The first stabilizer was small, barely large enough to protect a single lab, but it worked. The engineers watched as the readings on their instruments held steady, even as they simulated the kinds of fluctuations that had wiped out entire civilizations in the past. Word spread quickly, first among the engineers, then to the scientists, and finally to the leaders of the resistance. The implications were staggering. With enough stabilizers, it would be possible to protect not just a lab, but a city, a planet, even an entire star system. The Hegemony, of course, knew nothing of this. They continued to focus on weapons and fleets, never suspecting that the real threat was a machine that could make their entire arsenal obsolete. The decision was made to keep the technology secret, at least for now. The stabilizers were deployed in key locations, hidden beneath cities, embedded in the infrastructure of space stations, disguised as mundane equipment. Each one was a silent guardian, a promise that humanity would not go quietly into the night. But secrets have a way of coming to light, especially when the stakes are this high. The Hegemony's fleets were the pride of the galaxy, massive, bristling with weapons, crewed by the best and brightest from 100 worlds. They were designed to intimidate, to overwhelm, to crush any resistance before it could take root. But they were also predictable. Their tactics had not changed in centuries, their technology refined but not reinvented. They relied on numbers, on tradition, on the assumption that no one would ever dare to challenge their supremacy. The humans, meanwhile, had been building something very different. In the dark spaces between the stars, in the hidden folds of reality created by the stabilizer engines, a new kind of fleet was taking shape. The ships were smaller than the Hegemony's dreadnoughts, but far more advanced. Their hulls were made of exotic materials, their engines powered by fields that bent the very fabric of space. Most importantly, they were invisible. The Hegemony's sensors, designed to detect the familiar signatures of conventional ships, saw nothing. The human fleet could move undetected, strike without warning, and disappear before the enemy could respond. The first time the Hegemony realized something was wrong was during a routine patrol. A squadron of cruisers vanished without a trace, their last transmission a garbled burst of static. Search parties found nothing but empty space. Panic spread through the ranks. The admirals demanded answers, the scientists scrambled to explain the unexplainable, and the politicians pointed fingers in every direction but their own. Meanwhile, the human fleet continued to grow. Each new ship was a masterpiece of engineering, a testament to the power of adaptation and the value of thinking outside the box. The crews were handpicked, trained in secret, and bound by a code of loyalty that went beyond patriotism. They called themselves the Guardians, and their mission was simple: to ensure that humanity would never again be at the mercy of someone else's map. The universe is not a safe place. This is a lesson that every Death Worlder learns, early and often. For humans, it was a fact of life, woven into the fabric of their culture, their stories, their very DNA. But there are dangers that go beyond storms and predators, beyond war and famine. There are threats that come not from the outside, but from the very structure of reality itself. The Harbingers were one such threat. They were not a species, not in any sense that made sense to the biologists or the diplomats. They were a phenomenon, a process, a kind of cosmic cancer that spread through the fabric of space and time. Where they passed, the laws of physics unraveled, the constants shifted, and entire civilizations vanished without a trace. The first signs were subtle: a star that flickered and died, a planet that crumbled into dust, a signal that faded into static. Most species never noticed, or if they did, they assumed it was a natural disaster, a fluke, a problem for someone else to solve. But the humans noticed. They studied the patterns, mapped the spread, and realized that the Harbingers were not just a threat to Earth, but to the entire galaxy. The stabilizer engines were their answer. By creating pockets of stability, they could hold back the tide, buy time for research, for adaptation, for survival. It was not a perfect solution. The Harbingers were relentless, and the stabilizers required constant maintenance, constant vigilance. But it was enough to give humanity a fighting chance, enough to offer hope to the other species of the galaxy. The decision was made to share the technology, but only with those who were willing to learn, to adapt, to become partners in the fight for survival. The Hegemony predictably refused. They saw the stabilizers as a threat to their power, a challenge to their authority. They tried to seize the technology, to control it, to use it as a weapon. They failed. Certainly. Here's the next section, continuing the expanded, detailed HFY narrative in your style group voice. The Hegemony's council chamber was a monument to arrogance. It soared above the city, a crystalline spire that caught the light of the system's sun and scattered it in 1,000 directions. Inside, the air was always cool, the lighting always perfect, the acoustics engineered so that every word, every whisper, every sigh of exasperation could be heard by all. On this day, the chamber was filled to capacity. Delegates from every member world, every client state, every vassal and tributary had gathered to witness what was supposed to be the final act in the long drama of human resistance. The agenda was simple: ratify the annexation of Sol, distribute the spoils, and move on to the next item of business. But as the session began, it became clear that something was wrong. The usual air of smug certainty was gone, replaced by a tension that crackled just beneath the surface. The delegates whispered among themselves, their eyes darting to the main display, where a live feed from the Sol system showed nothing. No ships, no debris, no sign of the human fleet that had been so recently destroyed. Admiral Vexer, summoned from his victory banquet, stood at the center of the chamber, his scales dull with fatigue and frustration. "There must be a malfunction," he insisted, his voice brittle. "Our sensors are the finest in the galaxy. They cannot all be wrong." But the technicians shook their heads. The data was clear. The human fleet had vanished, not destroyed, not scattered, but simply gone. Panic spread like wildfire. The delegates demanded answers, the admirals barked orders, the scientists babbled theories. Some blamed sabotage, others a new human weapon, still others whispered of ancient prophecies and cosmic retribution. In the midst of the chaos, a single message arrived. It was brief, almost polite, and it changed everything. To the Council of the Hegemony. We have withdrawn our forces from Seoul. We suggest you do the same. Further aggression will be met with consequences you are not prepared to face. This is not a threat, it is a courtesy. The Guardians. The chamber fell silent. For the first time in living memory, the Hegemony was faced with an enemy it could not intimidate, could not bribe, could not simply outlast. The collapse began that day, not with a bang, but with a whisper. The Hegemony had always prided itself on its restraint. Its wars were precise, its punishments measured, its justice swift, but never excessive. At least, that was the story it told itself. But humans had a different relationship with violence. For them, overkill was not a failure of discipline, but a calculated choice. When the stakes were high enough, when the threat was existential, they did not hesitate to do whatever was necessary. The most infamous example came during the siege of New Kolante. The city had been overrun by a coalition of Hegemony loyalists and local collaborators. Its population held hostage, its infrastructure turned into a fortress. The Hegemony expected a protracted siege, a slow, grinding campaign that would sap the will of the defenders and demonstrate the futility of resistance. Instead, the humans responded with overwhelming force. They deployed orbital artillery, dropped kinetic rods from orbit, and finally, when it became clear that the enemy was using the city's biolabs to develop a doomsday weapon, they glassed the entire region with nuclear fire. The world watched in horror as the city vanished in a flash of light. The Hegemony's propagandists screamed of war crimes, of barbarism, of a return to the Dark Ages, but the human ambassador was unrepentant. "We were faced with a choice," she said, her voice cold and clear. "Lose a city or lose a world. We chose the lesser evil." The message was clear. Humanity would not be cowed by accusations of brutality. They would do what was necessary to survive, and they would not apologize for it. The Hegemony, for all its bluster, understood. In the end, it was not the destruction of New Kolante that broke their will, but the realization that the humans were willing to do what they could not. As the stabilizer technology spread, it became clear that the old ways of doing business were no longer sufficient. The Hegemony's model of top-down control, of secrets and silos and rigid hierarchies, was ill-suited to a world where survival depended on cooperation. The humans insisted on open-source blueprints, on peer review, on cross-species certification. They established academies where engineers from every world could learn the new science, and they enforced strict protocols to prevent the technology from being weaponized. At first, the old guard resisted. They tried to hoard the knowledge, to use it as a bargaining chip, to maintain their grip on power. But the stabilizers were too complex, too interdependent, too reliant on a network of trust and transparency. Slowly, grudgingly, the Hegemony adapted. New institutions emerged: the stabilizer guilds, the quantum councils, the interstellar safety boards. Old rivalries faded as worlds realized that their fates were now linked, that a failure in one system could cascade across the network and doom them all. The process was messy, contentious, and often infuriating, but it worked. For the first time in living memory, the galaxy began to function as a true community, not just a collection of competing interests. And at the center of it all, the humans watched and waited and taught. The grand narratives of history are written in the blood of empires, but the real work of survival happens in the margins, in the quiet moments, in the choices made by ordinary people. A technician in a backwater system notices a fluctuation in the stabilizer field and reports it, even though it means admitting a mistake. A governor refuses a bribe from a merchant house, choosing instead to fund a new academy. A group of students from rival worlds collaborate on a new calibration protocol, saving a dozen systems from a catastrophic failure. These stories rarely make the official histories, but they are the threads that hold the fabric of the galaxy together. They are the reason the stabilizers work, the reason the harbingers are held at bay, the reason the old empires crumble and new alliances form. In the end, it is not the dreadnoughts or the diplomats who save the world, but the engineers, the teachers, the stubborn, hopeful souls who refuse to give up. Certainly. Here's the next section, continuing the expanded, detailed HFY narrative in your style group voice. The collapse of the hegemony was not a single event, but a slow grinding process, a death by 1,000 cuts. It began at the edges, in the outlying systems, where the reach of the central government was weakest and the promise of stabilizer technology was strongest. Merchant houses that had once thrived on the trade of fear and protection found their clients drifting away, lured by the promise of self-sufficiency and shared knowledge. Governors who had ruled through intimidation and patronage discovered that their power was slipping, their authority undermined by a new generation of engineers and technicians who answered not to them, but to the network. The old aristocracies tried to fight back. They raised private armies, hired mercenaries, and launched desperate campaigns to reclaim their lost influence. But the world had changed. The stabilizer academies produced not just technicians but leaders, men and women who understood the new reality, who could build alliances across species and systems, who saw the galaxy not as a collection of fiefdoms, but as a single interconnected organism. In the great cities of the core worlds, the old families retreated behind their walls, clinging to their titles and their traditions. But outside, the streets were alive with new voices, new ideas, new possibilities. The collapse was not violent, not at first. It was a quiet revolution, a shifting of loyalties, a reordering of priorities. And as the old houses fell, the new world took shape. For all their power, the stabilizers were not a panacea. They could hold back the harbingers, but only for a time. They could create pockets of stability, but they could not guarantee safety forever. The universe was still a dangerous place, and the threat of cosmic catastrophe was never far away. But the difference was hope. Where once the galaxy had faced the darkness alone, now it faced it together. The network of stabilizers was more than a technological marvel. It was a symbol of unity, of shared purpose, of the possibility of survival. In the academies and the workshops, in the council chambers and the marketplaces, people from 100 worlds worked side by side, learning from each other, teaching each other, building a future that was not just possible, but plausible. There were setbacks, of course. There were failures, betrayals, moments of doubt and despair, but each time the network held. Each time the community rallied. Each time the hope endured. And in the end, that was enough. The aftermath of the collapse was a time of rebuilding, of reimagining, of redefinition. The great cities that had once been symbols of imperial power were transformed into centers of learning and innovation. The old laws, written to preserve the privileges of the few, were replaced by new codes that emphasized transparency, accountability, and the common good. The process was slow, uneven, and often contentious. There were arguments over jurisdiction, over resources, over the proper balance between autonomy and cooperation. But the stabilizer network provided a framework, a set of shared values and goals that made compromise possible. In the new world, power was measured not by the size of one's fleet or the depth of one's coffers, but by the strength of one's connections, the quality of one's contributions, the trust one inspired in others. The curators of time, the engineers, the teachers, the archivists, became the new aristocracy. Their work was not glamorous, but it was essential. They kept the network running, the knowledge flowing, the hope alive. And in the quiet moments, when the work was done and the stars shone bright above, they allowed themselves to dream of a future, where the darkness would never return. The galaxy never quite got used to the contradictions of humanity. They could be gentle, nurturing, endlessly patient. They could also be ruthless, uncompromising, willing to do whatever was necessary to survive. This duality was not a flaw, but a feature. It was the reason the stabilizer network worked, the reason the harbingers were held at bay, the reason the old empires fell and the new world rose. Humans taught their allies to be both builders and warriors, to value both compassion and strength, to understand that survival sometimes required hard choices, and that mercy was not the same as weakness. And they shared their knowledge freely, but they also enforced strict standards. They welcomed newcomers, but they demanded accountability. They forgave mistakes, but they did not tolerate betrayal. In the end, it was this balance, this willingness to be both teacher and judge, both healer and executioner, that made humanity the heart of the new galaxy. The stabilizer network brought together species that had once been enemies, rivals, strangers. It created new alliances, new coalitions, new forms of cooperation. Pirates became privateers, mercenaries became peacekeepers, smugglers became supply officers. Old grudges were set aside, old wounds healed, old boundaries redrawn. The new world was not perfect. There were still conflicts, still injustices, still moments of fear and anger and loss. But the network provided guardrails, checks and balances, mechanisms for resolving disputes and correcting mistakes. The galaxy was no longer a collection of isolated fortresses, but a living, breathing organism, a community of communities, a network of networks, a family of families. And at the center of it all, the humans watched and waited and taught. Certainly. Here's the next section, continuing the expanded, detailed HFY narrative in your style group voice. History, the humans like to say, is written by the victors. But in the new galaxy, history was being written by the survivors, the builders, the quiet heroes whose names would never appear in the official records. There was the story of Governor Lyra, who returned from a year at the Stabilizer Academy to find her city in chaos. The old guard had tried to reassert control, but Lyra, armed with new knowledge and a new sense of purpose, refused to play their game. She dismantled the private militias, redirected funds to public workshops, and invited engineers from rival worlds to help rebuild the city's infrastructure. Within a generation, her city was a model of resilience and cooperation, its people proud not of their heritage, but of their adaptability. There was the tale of Wingard Sareth, a proud warrior who had spent his life fighting the humans. When his daughter was accepted as an apprentice at a Stabilizer Academy, he was furious. But as he watched her grow, watched her learn, teach, and eventually lead, he came to see the value in the new order. He died still stern, still proud, but no longer bitter. His line, once known for its ferocity, became known for its wisdom. And there was the legend of the small insectoid species from the Rim, denied an embassy for centuries. When the Stabilizer network went live, they became the galaxy's foremost experts in a rare alloy essential to the new technology. Within 2 cycles, their world was a hub of trade and innovation, their people respected and welcomed across the network. These stories, and thousands like them, were the true foundation of the new galaxy. They were the reason the network worked, the reason the harbingers were held at bay, the reason the old empires faded and the new world flourished. Empires, it turned out, did not vanish in a single night. They crumbled slowly, their foundations eroded by 1,000 small acts of courage, kindness, and ingenuity. The old stories remained, the dreadnoughts, the pocket fleets, the night the skies shuddered. But the new stories were quieter, more hopeful. They were the stories of students who refused to weaponize a stabilizer, choosing instead to teach. Of shipwrights in former vassal towns who adapted human designs and saved entire systems from disaster. of admirals who learned humility and became champions of shared defense. In the end, it was not the grand gestures or the epic battles that defined the new galaxy, but the daily work of survival, the stubborn refusal to give up, the willingness to learn and to teach. The galaxy was still dangerous, still unpredictable, still full of threats, both known and unknown. But it was also full of hope, of possibility, of the quiet, persistent belief that together anything was possible. The universe the humans taught is indifferent. It does not care who rules, who conquers, who survives. It is a place of chaos and beauty, of danger and opportunity, of endless possibility. But within that indifference, there is room for meaning. There is room for choice. There is room for hope. The stabilizer network was not a guarantee of safety, but a promise of possibility. It was a tool, a framework, a foundation on which to build. It was a reminder that survival is not a given, but a goal that must be pursued, protected, and shared. The humans, for all their contradictions, understood this better than anyone. They were not perfect, not infallible, not always wise, but they were good enough for the job. They made hard choices, taught others how to live with those choices, and built institutions that made worse choices less likely. They showed the galaxy that the real answer is not more force, but better organization. Not more power, but more hands on the tools. Not more fear, but more hope. And in the quiet moments, when the work was done and the stars shone bright above, they allowed themselves to dream, not just of survival, but of something more, of a future worth fighting for. If you enjoyed this expanded HFY story, please leave a comment below. Tell us which moment shocked you most: the dreadnought reveal, the stabilizer lesson, or the human moral calculus. I personally read every comment. Like the video if the story gave you chills or a grin. Subscribe for more HFY audiobooks and expanded stories in this style. New episodes drop regularly. Share this with a friend who loves Humans Are Weirdly Brilliant stories.